Partners to talk about flexibility in evidence-based design. Josh, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me, Mike.
Yeah, for those who don't know, Josh and I go way back to our first semester at grad school at Georgia Tech, where I first learned about healthcare design, honestly, from Josh and his experience before coming to Tech. And I thought he was crazy for being interested in it. And here I am today hosting a healthcare design podcast. So the irony abounds. So Josh, I'm happy to be talking to you today.
I think one of the most ironic pieces of us talking about design in general is that when we first met, we agreed on everything in life morals, principles, lifestyle, everything except design. And so I find it full circle now that that's what we're talking about today.
I don't agree with you anyway, but so Josh, why don't you take a minute to go over who you are as an architect and just give us a little introduction.
Sure. So I started my architecture journey at the University of Florida. So I'm a Gator alumni. Go Gators! I know you enjoy that. Mm-hmm. And I started there thinking that I was going to be a dual major aerospace mechanical engineer. And I was in my second semester struggling with the design problem, couldn't figure it out, had multiple solutions, just in the professor's office day after day with the wrong answer. Yeah. Finally one day he looked at me and he said, "How many answers do you think there are to this problem?" And I said, "There's infinite number of answers. That's how the world works." And he said, "No, there's only one answer." And I had this confused look on my face, and he looked at me, he said, "Are you sure you're not an architect?" And I'd never thought of that before, and I thought, well, what are these architect people like, and who are they? Let me go meet them. So I walked across campus and immediately fell in love and realized that's my calling in life. I was meant to be an architect because there are an infinite number of answers.
Yeah.
So I don't think like an engineer, thankfully. I think like an architect. But yeah, University of Florida.
I think you might be the first person who I know who stumbled upon architecture accidentally trying to find something else. Usually they go in and give up on it because architecture is difficult, but I've never heard that career entry path.
Yeah, cool. It's unique for sure, and almost failing an engineering class is not the way I wanted to find it, but nevertheless I found it. Graduated from UF and went to work at a great organization, Gresham Smith and Partners, and loved every minute of it there. I was there for almost 2 years. While I was there, I got to meet Sheila Bosch, who was their director of design at the time. Mm-hmm. Or the director of research at the time, and she introduced me to evidence-based design. So I blame her for all of this, right? And we still keep in touch. She's Georgia Tech alumni, which is where I went next. So it all fell in line. Just one thing after another. Meeting Sheila, talking with her, having conversations about what evidence-based design is and how it's defined and how it works and how it's implemented, and went to do my graduate studies at Georgia Tech, where I met you. Yeah. And argued with you for 2 years over how design works and shouldn't work. I blame Mike for a lot of the success in my career in design solutions.
You're welcome. I haven't seen that royalty check yet.
Yeah. Okay. It's in the mail. It's in the mail. While I was at Georgia Tech, I started working at the Simtegrate Design Lab with Craig Zimmering and Jennifer DeBose, mm-hmm. And worked on the research side of design, so design-based research, which is an interesting topic all in and of itself, and worked on a lot of cool projects with them and understanding how research then gets implemented back into the practice of architecture. That's where it started. Once I graduated Georgia Tech, that became my specialty, healthcare design. Because I loved it, as I knew about it, worked a lot in flexibility, did a lot of flexibility research mm-hmm. at Tech with a great colleague, Maya Labrador, who you know as well. Mm-hmm. All of those things kind of came together to shape a career that's based in this evidence-based design implementation, and flexibility is just a highlight of that.
Sure. So you mentioned the influence of Sheila Bosch in your first role and exposing you to evidence-based design.
Yeah.
What were some of those initial reactions to and the things that you latched onto that kept you going after it?
Oh man, so you know me, I love a good debate. I love arguing. My wife would agree and so would my daughter, right? That I love to argue, I love to debate, and I find energy in that. I love doing that. And the first time I heard Sheila give a seminar at Gresham Smith, I disagreed with some of the things she was saying, and I couldn't understand some of the others. So I went up to afterwards and said, "Oh, we got to talk. I got to take you to lunch. Something's got to give here. Like I'm not following and I actually disagree with some of it. So teach me, like, let's talk this out. Because she loved it, because it's a conversation, and that's how we started.
Sure.
So that's really how it started, was that boldness to just step up and say, hey, I'm not sure that we're on the same page, and clearly you know more than me. Why am I not on that page? And what can I do to get there? And who do you know? And how can I talk to them? So we just began a relationship out of that, out of just talking to one another, answering questions, going back and forth with, well, where did you learn that? How did you figure that out? And it was a mentorship there for almost 2 years.
Yeah.
With Sheila. Yeah.
Very cool. And then moving on to the Syndicate Lab, what types of projects were you involved with? And obviously, I know you did your thesis project associated with that group. What did that research kind of look like, and what did you learn from that?
So with Syndicate, there was the research that I conducted, aside from my thesis research, was a lot about the projects that were going on at the time there at the research center inside the laboratory itself. One of those main publications that came out of that was called the Active Design Guidelines, and it's about different ways that you design communities, a lot of urban design involved as well, about how you set up the built environment to support a physical lifestyle as opposed to a sedentary lifestyle.
Yeah.
How do we activate the spaces so that they can be engaging and encourage folks to simply walk or simply take the stairs, or not everything is so convenient, but at the same time it's engaging and inspirational enough that you want to engage the environment. So that was one of the research projects I conducted there. And then some of the other things were, we put together a checklist for the Department of Defense on how to design evidence-based projects. So as part of that was a huge project that went on for many years, and I was a very small participant in that. But I mean, that was a joint effort, Georgia Tech, Clemson, Department of Defense. It was a big project at the time, and I just was lucky enough to be on the tail end of it and catch a little bit of that one. But those are two of the big ones that I worked on there.
That's really cool. I don't think I remember. I know you were working with the DoD. I forgot how large that project was. It makes sense. A government division of that size having guidelines. I'm sure it had triplicate check involved. But yeah. So, and then moving in professionally, I know you and I are both EDAC certified, which is the evidence-based design accreditation. I'm curious why you did that and what that process looked like, if anyone who's listening is considering that. What value did you find initially, and what value have you found since?
Sure. So I highly encourage it. That is, it's been a certification that I've used every day. It's not one of those credentials you get and it's just
the alphabet soup extension at the end of your business card.
It's really a way of life. It's really a way of practice. That evidence-based design accreditation certification becomes who you are and the way you develop your work as your career moves on. So I think I did that before I got my actual architecture license.
Actually, me too.
Yeah, and it's, well, because one, it was low-hanging fruit. It's an easier thing to get than an architecture license, and because my education at Georgia Tech set me up to be able to take the exam pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Most of the study guides and all were written by people that I worked with, right? So I knew them and I knew their work and I knew their writing, and so that made it a lot easier for me as well. But I really encourage it. I think it's great to keep up with it. It develops a community, so there's a community of EDAC certified professionals, and it's a close-knit community, and we share and we collaborate across groups.
That's great. I want to move a little bit to some of those. You when we were prepared for this conversation, you talked about an always learning approach, and some of those initial takeaways that you had. You mentioned space syntax, which I don't even know what that is, reading it off the page, and daylighting strategies. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So
talk to me like I'm 5.
I can do that.
Yeah.
So a part of the premise to evidence-based design is that there's this continuous learning atmosphere, that the evidence base is always growing, it's always changing. So simply by adding to the evidence base may move the average needle one way or the other, right? So the more evidence you have, the stronger the evidence base is for things. And again, the more evidence you have, the more there is to learn.
Yeah.
So space syntax is one of those, so the two things that I mentioned were because they were surprising things that I learned that have changed the way I view architecture and design.
Yeah.
Space syntax is one of those things because it is this is my rudimentary definition. This is not at all what it actually is, and they're experts in this field, and that's a whole nother podcast, man. It is a graphic representation of a quantitative analysis of a plan.
Say that again.
A graphic representation of a quantitative analysis of a plan. So we are taught how to do qualitative analysis with descripts. This looks good, this feels right. I imagine this is where people will congregate. I designed this so that this is the welcome area. I put the front door here and you can see it from everywhere. So that is a qualitative analysis. And we're really good at qualitative analysis as architects, as designers. That's what we do. That's our training, right? We can even give you the philosophy behind why that is designed the way it is. That's how good we are.
And generations of people who informed why it's that way.
Yes. So space syntax actually gives the quantitative analysis to match that qualitative analysis. Actually, that's what you're hoping it does. Sometimes it aligns, sometimes it doesn't. Right? So it's basically a pixelated plan. It takes 1 foot by 1 foot squares across a floor plan and then can map, it's a heat map, color coding those spaces based on variables. So whether that's step depth, connectivity, visibility, so you can quantitatively analyze a floor plan separate from your qualitative analysis at a desk grid. So it changed my life, because I would say this is the congregation area and we throw a heat map on it, and actually the area that has the highest connectivity is in a different place. So they didn't align. So it taught me that there are metrics behind what we do and variables behind what we do that are outside of the qualitative realm. Which was, outside of what we learned. It's surprising.
Well, and there's been some, I think, development since we've been in school, developing tools for that, like spatiometrics is one that does healthcare qualitative or quantitative metrics, and then what's the environmentalism one? I'm blanking on the term, but it gives you daylighting situations and access to energy and other things like that. So I think there's been some implementations of tools that do that too.
But I think it just changed the way I looked at things, changed the way I looked at the plan. Because it provides more data, more information. It's that evidence base that just needed to inform. That was the first thing we talked about. The second thing, this one is more recent than space syntax, right? So in 2002, there was a biological discovery. In high school, you and I learned in our biology class that our vision is rods and cones, right? So you see through rods and cones, right? So in 2002, which was after my high school, maybe not after your high school.
Right in the middle.
So in 2002, there was a biological discovery of a third photoreceptor in your eye. It started getting research and more publications after 2008, but it's called the intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cell.
I was just about to say that.
Were you? Good, because I had to write it down, make sure I said it right. So this third photoreceptor and the discovery of this has just been implemented in the way that we design spaces, and we're talking the last 5-10 years, so it's relatively new. And basically, just like space syntax changed the way I thought about design, this photoreceptor changed the way I thought about lighting in design, and lighting is really important. And what this photoreceptor does is it only reads the blue light, the wavelength in the blue light. LEDs are manufactured with the daylight blue lights, but it's because it's a mix of colors from yellow to purple that render blue to your rods and cones. But it doesn't fool that third photoreceptor into thinking that it's blue light, right? This third photoreceptor is directly connected to the portion of your brain that controls your circadian rhythm. So your entire biology, that need for sleep, and what sleep does and how healthy that is connected to this photoreceptor. So it's so important that we're connected to natural light, and so important that there's no substitute in artificial lighting for it. Even though the color rendering may be the same, the wavelength isn't the same. So it has a different biological effect and impact on your body. So those are just two things that out of evidence-based design, where you come across these things and you come across researchers who are connected to these things. They've made their entire career studying them and developing them, and they just inform your practice, and they're so impactful to the way that we do things now, that it just changes the way you think.
It almost begs the question of how it was done before without that knowledge.
It does. Sometimes it does, and I wonder, what was I thinking? Man, I've got a couple projects I don't want photographs of anymore, right? Because I wasn't practicing this way.
Yeah, exactly.
But you do run across these things in your profession, in your career, that just change the way you think.
Yeah.
And I think that we learn in architecture school, be flexible, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of flexibility, we were kind of talking about the different, I guess, types of flexibility in the design of your spaces, types, scales, implementation processes. Talk about a little bit of those things.
I'm a big nerd when it comes to flexibility. This is a topic I've been
just
studying.
Flexibility?
Yeah, well, maybe some other things too. Just flexibility. We'll stick with that. I've studied this for, more than a decade, and I had a great honor and privilege of working with my thesis advisor, Craig Zimmerman. 10 years after graduation, he partnered with Emory Healthcare for a project. And the premise of this whole project was, one of the guiding principles was flexibility.
Yeah.
And so I came in as the architect for the project, and he's like, well, here's your chance a decade later to practice what you preach.
Yeah.
Right? So he's still giving me a grade 10 years into my
You still have your
career.
thesis advisor.
I did, yes.
As now your client manager.
Yes, that is exactly what was happening.
Yeah.
And you go, well, I remember 10 years ago you wrote this article and you wrote this paragraph at this time and said this. How do we implement that here? So he's bringing stuff up that we researched together.
That's
10
great.
years earlier.
Sure, it's challenging.
It's so much fun, right?
Yeah.
It's a blast. But it pushed the project forward to a place that was very successful for all parties. In part of that research and part of the project, we were able to explore different types of flexibility, and basically it boils down to 3 types of flexibility: adaptability, convertibility, and transformability. And adaptability is probably what you think about construction changes in time over time.
Sure.
Transformability is probably something a little more rare that you don't really think about. That's the U.S. Navy has the Mercy ship, and they have hospitals on ships. So when a natural disaster happens, they can be responsive and move to a different area and provide assistance to a healthcare system and transform the system. Right, so that's transformability. And then convertibility is a space that can be used for the same configuration but can be used for multiple uses. We see that in patient rooms that are designed for ICU, that are used as med-surg until they need to be used for ICU.
Or outpatient clinics used for sleep lab research in the evenings to keep a 24-hour cycle on a 12-hour cycle space.
That's right. And we have examples of convertibility that are all over the place as well. So those are the 3 types that we talk about and have an understanding of. And those 3 types then have 6 or 7 different scales that go all the way from the scale of the campus or the neighborhood down to the scale of what I affectionately call the stuff in the room. Whether that's FF&E, furniture, fixtures, and equipment, artwork and accessories, wayfinding and signage. Those kinds of things have a place in flexibility. So we implement that on every project by taking this matrix where you have one axis is the types, the other axis is the scale. And you have an answer for every one of them. The answer may be that you're not going to use it, but the answer may be, here's how we're going to address this in this specific project.
And sometimes those defining what you're not going to do is more helpful than you might think. Why should we just fill out this section and say no, because we're not actually doing anything in there?
Absolutely.
But 6 months down the road, when you're near the end of design, you're like, why didn't we do that? You've documented that you discussed it, it was reviewed, and it was projected, passed over. Or even in construction, when you're like, why didn't we do this? You're like, oh, we did review it, and we determined this was why we didn't do it. So just to say that the reasons why no are sometimes just as important as the reasons why yes.
Absolutely. My team and I have a strategy that we use when we're doing visioning meetings or programming meetings. And when we close out and we're about to start drawing, right? We're about to enter schematic design. We take 3 columns: what we know, what we think we know, and what we don't know. And the goal of that last meeting is to get everything from what we don't know and what we think we know into the what we know column. And sometimes it's the entire group doesn't know. We're going to figure this out. It's going to be an experiment as we go forward. But just noting that and realizing that and documenting that, hey, this is the piece that we don't know if this is going to work, but we're going to try. That's the piece that becomes pretty critical.
Can you give me those 3 types of flexibilities again?
I got an infographic I can send you that you're
Okay,
gonna,
great. Well, I'll link that in the show notes. You
You'll
guys can
love
see
it.
that.
You'll love it. Yeah, adaptability, transformability, and convertibility.
Cool. That's a great. I like looking at a project at those scales, and I think one question I have about that is how you address those with your clients in the earlier stages of a project. Do they come to you with the idea in mind of what type of flexibility they're looking for? Do they come saying, we need to accomplish a couple of different things, but we're not sure how? Is this a tool that you work on with them, side by side, or is it something that you bring to them later, or something they come to you with kind of already in mind?
That's a great question. I can't think of a client in the past 10 years that has not said the word flexibility in one of the first couple meetings. It's always a buzzword, but then boiling down what they really want and what they try to get to is really the part where we have a better understanding of what they mean when they say flexibility. Flexibility is a very broad term. It means a lot of things to a lot of people in a lot of ways. So it boiling that down to figure out what are we trying to solve, what is the essence of the question, what's some root cause analysis, why did you say that word? I've heard that words mean things.
I've heard that too.
And so and not all the time do they mean the same thing to the same people. So
I have also heard that.
Yes. So we just want to be sure that we're answering the question they're asking and addressing the question they're asking, and trying to stick with that solution. So even if they don't ask that question, we usually ask it among the list of 20 other questions in programming and visioning. When we set guiding principles for projects, that's usually some of the things that we do.
Cool. I feel like I just keep lobbing you softballs for you to hit, or I'm not participating in this. It's more like I'm not even participating. I'm just here. Can you tell me about this? Tell me about this. But we talked some, and you were like super excited to get to this point about the natural curiosity of this process, and so I just kind of let you loose on that idea, and you can explain a little bit what you're talking about when you say that.
Yeah, it's such I love this topic because one, just like you, architecture is a calling. I don't think there's anything else in the world that I could be doing, right? I love it so much. I think this is what I'm supposed to do, right? I think every architect should feel like that. If you don't, find something else, right?
There's a lot of other options out there.
There's plenty of other options.
You haven't heard.
That's right. And with an architecture degree, you can do just about all of them, right?
Except to be an aerospace engineer.
Yes, they won't let you be an engineer with an architecture
There's
degree.
only one solution.
That's what I hear. That's what I hear. Natural curiosity. I ask a lot of questions, and there's no question that I think is a dumb question. There's no question that shouldn't be asked. I think if I even have started practicing at the end of conversations, or at the end of whether it's a download with a teammate or if it's an end of a client meeting, what's the question I'm not asking you?
Yeah.
Right? What should I be asking you that I'm not? What are you surprised I haven't asked about?
Sure.
Those are, first, it takes people a minute to think about that. But I think we don't ask enough questions from each other, from the profession, from our clients, our colleagues. We run with what we think we know, rather than just slowing down and asking the question. And I think approaching our work and approaching life with some natural curiosity about how things work. Why is that way?
Yeah. That's an advice that I give to interns and sort of the entry level 0 to 3 professionals who are maybe working their first job. I tell them, I know that you don't know what to do, so don't act like you do know what to do, because otherwise you're going to go Google the answer and hope you get the right one, and you're going to spend half the day doing that. I know that you don't know, so I'd like for you to just tell me and ask, and I'm happy to tell you.
Absolutely.
And everyone around you is happy to do that. And everyone along the whole line of the project would love for you to just ask the question, get the information. We all work together better and quicker. So just to put a point there, and if you don't know,
ask.
It's fine, and ask.
I've never met an architect that didn't want to be a teacher at some point. We all want to be teachers even if every day at our office we want to be teachers. And so I'm trying to think. I've worked with a lot of folks that I can't think of an architect that didn't want to.
Even if they weren't passionate about like teaching, they want their teams to be better, and so they'd rather answer the question so that everyone is better and more efficient.
Yeah. And then the other point to that I think is important to make is that in architecture you gain years of experience, but sometimes 20 years of experience can actually be 1 year of experience 19 times.
Yeah.
And not actually a growth of 20 years of experience.
Yeah,
the way we practice evolves and changes and moves, just like the economy, just like the world, and we have to keep up. And sometimes I'm one of those that believes we should be leading the change, not trying to keep up with what are other industries doing. How can we move faster? And it's okay for us to be innovative and even disruptive at times, to be in the lead of a change.
Yeah.
That just being curious about what comes next and how can I get there and how can I help and what questions should I be asking.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about an industry that takes 2 to 3 years to pull off each incremental improvement, finishing a project from design through construction to be cutting edge or leading. It's a challenge, but I think it's a nice charge that you're putting out there to find ways to not just be who is the debutante, like royal person who's like, let me find my people and see where they're going so I can lead them. It's like, no, that's not really how like leadership works. It's a bit more of a come follow me, let's go work there and get there together.
No, I agree, and I think that natural curiosity just plays a role in that. Be curious about what you're doing and how it's working, and ask tons of questions.
Yeah. So people who are hearing this conversation, who are interested, maybe this is the first time they've heard about evidence-based design or EBD or EDAC or any of it, or whatever sort of amalgamation of consonants and vowels you can come up with. What is maybe the best first step into exploring evidence-based design for themselves?
Yeah, so there's a ton of great resources out there. Healthcare Design Magazine is one of those. It's an industry publication. It's got great articles, flashy pictures. I mean, it's one of the more eye-catching, consumed by the masses. That's the one that's going to draw the most attention first, I think. And if you're, a little nerdy like me, there's the Herd Journal, right? That's got a ton of stuff in there that can do that. EDAC has its own website as well, right? There's the study guides, all that material there.
Yeah.
And then there's also evidence-based design is it's an entire industry.
Yeah.
So
the Center for Health Design website is, I think, on board and a big part of the EDAC and evidence-based community, and there are a lot of like graphic guides there that I've even sent to some of my clients who they're not in the stage of a project yet, but they're like trying to explore an idea, and rather than maybe going through our own process of coming up with a detail or a drawing or whatever, there's some great resources of this is an ICU room and a lot of the typical things that are in it. Here's a med surg room, or here's an outpatient clinic, or a behavioral health room. All those resources are on that website that you can just sort of click and link, and be the resource for your client, even if you're not generating the research, but helping them connect with where they can find that information. That's
right. The only time I would pump the brakes on that is evidence-based design by definition is a process. So there's not evidence-based design solutions and you check the boxes. It is by definition, it is a process.
Yeah. And
you have to work the process.
When I should clarify, on the same page there comes like a spreadsheet you can download with like 19 tabs that walk you through the process of not only identifying the existing research, but helping to contribute to adding more to it. So definitely process.
Yes.
Definitely not just solutions to cherry pick, but a good starting point for initial references.
About showing you solutions that have come from others working the same process. Yeah, so no, I agree. Center for Health Design is a great job putting their information out there and publishing it, which is very helpful. Yeah.
Well, taking a cue from what you just said a few moments ago, are there any questions I haven't asked you about evidence-based design that you would like to share?
About evidence-based design?
Yeah, anything I haven't asked you about?
I think we've covered a lot here today. I've talked fast.
That's great. I'll have to slow down. You guys can slow down the playback speed and catch it a second time around. I do want to share just a bit of a news roundup on healthcare design around the country. HDR opened a new office in Kansas City with the new staff that they're developing there. the VA has proposed $4.1 billion for construction, $3 billion of that for about 10 medical facilities across Puerto Rico, Oregon, Washington, Texas, and California. So that's some major development. Mount Carmel Health System in Central Ohio, as part of Trinity Health, is breaking ground on a $250 million project encompassing a broad range of inpatient and outpatient imaging, surgery, etc. And Bay Care Health from Florida, where we're both from originally, is opening a new bed tower and MOB in Florida, 60 beds, operating rooms, etc. So lots of stuff going around in the community, and that was only, I'm sure, a snippet. So lots of exciting stuff. If you would like to hear more like this, or today's conversation with Josh on evidence-based design, you can join the Healthcare Design Network and get the weekly newsletter, sort of weekly newsletter is what I call it, starting in April. Look, I've got stuff going on, so I can't always crank it out, but I do my best. You can go to healthcaredesignnetwork.com and sign up there. Josh, thanks for talking with me today. I really appreciate it. And,
thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been a great conversation. If people want to get in touch with you to learn more about this, or in other things in general, what's the best way for them to contact you?
There's a couple ways. So I'm on LinkedIn, so you can find me and message me on there. You can shoot me an email at jdc@smp-studio.com. That's smp-studio.com. It's Degenga and Partners.
I'll put it in the show notes so people can just click it.
Check our website out too. You can get to me through that way as well.
Cool. Well, I really appreciate your time. Appreciate you sharing with us, and look forward to seeing you out there.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.